Far out in the ocean, where the water is as blue as the prettiest cornflower and as clear as crystal, there dwell the sea folk. It is so deep there that many church steeples, piled one upon another, would not reach from the seabed to the surface. The most unique flowers and plants grow at this place, the leaves and stems of which are so soft that the slightest agitation of the water causes them to stir to life. Fishes, both large and small, glide between the branches just as birds fly among the trees here on land. In the deepest spot of all stands the castle of the Sea King. Its walls are built of coral, and the windows are of the clearest amber. The roof is formed of shells that open and close as the water flows over them. Their appearance is very beautiful, for in each lies a glittering pearl which would be fit for the crown of a queen. The Sea King had been a widower for many years, and his aged mother kept house for him. She was a very wise woman and loved to take care of the little sea princesses, her granddaughters. They were 6 beautiful maids, but the youngest was the prettiest of them all. Her skin was as clear and delicate as a rose leaf, and her eyes as blue as the deepest sea. All the others simply called her the Little Mermaid. Like all of the sea folk, the king and his family had no feet, and their bodies ended in a fish tail. The little mermaid was a strange child, quiet and thoughtful. Nothing gave her so much pleasure as to hear about the world above the sea. She and her sisters made their old grandmother tell them all she knew of the ships and of the towns, the people and the animals on land. "Grandma, Grandma, please tell us of the land above." And so their grandmother started. She told them that the flowers of the land have fragrance, and that the trees of the forest are green. There are fish among the trees who can sing so sweetly that it is quite a pleasure to hear them. The grandmother called our little birds fish, for the girls would not have understood her. They had never seen birds before. "When you have reached your 15th year," said the grandmother, "you will have permission to rise up out of the sea." None of the princesses longed so much for her turn to come as the youngest, she who had the longest time to wait. Many nights she stood by the open window, looking up through the dark blue water. She could see the moon and stars shining faintly. Sometimes a black shadow passed between her and them. Then she knew that it was either a whale swimming over her head, or a ship full of human beings who never imagined that a little mermaid was standing beneath them, holding out her white hands towards the keel of their ship. At last she reached her 15th year. "Well, now you're grown up," said her grandmother, "so you must let me adorn you before you swim to the surface." And she placed a wreath of white lilies in the girl's hair, and every flower leaf was half a pearl. "Farewell," said the little mermaid, and rose as gently as a bubble in the direction of the light. The sun was about to set as she raised her head above the waves. The clouds were tinted with crimson and gold. A large ship with 3 masts lay motionless on the water. Thereupon a celebration seemed to be taking place. There was music and song on board, and 100 colored lanterns were lighted. The little mermaid climbed close to the deck and beheld a number of well-dressed people on it. Among them was a young prince with large black eyes and a gentle smile on his face. She swam quickly to the other side of the ship to have a better view of the scene. The prince stood now in the middle of a crowd of dancing sailors. Suddenly they raised their glasses and shouted, "Happy birthday to our prince!" After that, more than 100 rockets shot up in the air, making the night sky as bright as day. The little mermaid was so startled that she dived under the water, and when she again stretched out her head, it appeared to her as if all the stars of heaven were falling around her. She could not turn her face away from the spectacle, and the young prince was quite impressed too. With a gentle smile, he stepped to the railing of the ship and glanced into the sky. He looked so handsome that the little mermaid could not keep her eyes from him. Meanwhile, the last bit of the sun perished in the orange-colored ocean. At a single blow, the sea became restless, and the waves rose mountainously high. To the little mermaid this was pleasant sport, since she loved being rocked by the ocean. Lightning appeared in the distance, and thunder rumbled throughout the sky. At one moment it was so pitch dark that she could not see a single object, but then a flash of lightning revealed the whole scene. The little mermaid now perceived that the crew were in danger. The ship groaned and creaked until finally she split apart. The mermaid saw the prince sink under the deep waves. She was glad, for she thought he would now be with her. Then she remembered that human beings cannot live under water. But the prince mustn't die. So she dived deeply under the dark waters till at length she reached him. His eyes were closed, and his breath was hardly noticeable. She held his head above the water and let the waves carry them where they would. In the morning the storm had ceased, but of the ship not a single fragment could be seen. The sun rose up red and glowing from the water. Its beams brought back a color of health to the prince's cheeks. He looked so handsome to the mermaid that she kissed his forehead over and over. Then she discovered a little bay in which the water was quite still. There she laid him on the sand in the warm sunshine. Suddenly a number of young girls came to the bay. The little mermaid swam out farther from the shore and placed herself between some high rocks. Then she saw that the prince came to life again, and smiled upon one of the girls who stood round him. But he sent no smile in the little mermaid's direction. He knew not that she had saved him. This made her very unhappy, and she dived down sorrowfully into the water and returned to her father's castle. Her sisters asked her what she had seen during her first visit to the surface, but she told them nothing. And so, for now, she didn't see the prince again, and she grew more and more melancholic. After a while she asked her grandmother, "Can human beings live forever?" The old lady shook her head. "No, they must also die, and their term of life is even shorter than ours. We sometimes live to 300 years, but when we cease to exist here, we only become the foam on the surface of the water. Human beings have a soul which lives forever." "Is there anything I can do to win an immortal soul?" asked the little mermaid. "No," said her grandmother, "unless a man were to love you more than himself. Then he would give his soul to you and retain his own as well. But this can never happen. Your fish tail is considered on land to be rather ugly. In order to be handsome, humans think it necessary to have 2 stilts, which they call legs." The little mermaid looked sorrowfully at her fish tail. "Let us be happy," said the old lady, "and dart and spring about during the 300 years we are allowed to live. That is really quite long enough." She clapped her hands to call all the sea folk in order to celebrate a great court ball. After everything was prepared, they swam over to the large ballroom, which was made of thick but transparent crystal. Through the halls flew the broad stream, and in it danced the mermen and the mermaids to the music of their own sweet singing. After a while, the little mermaid started to sing too. She had the loveliest voice of any on land or in the sea, and sang so sweetly that the hearts of all the others were filled with happiness. The whole court became silent and applauded her with hands and tails. And in that moment she felt delight in her heart. But then she thought again of the prince. He would never be able to hear her lovely voice, which made her very sad again. Nevertheless, she went on with her singing. After the dance, she thought, "I wonder what the prince is doing at this moment, he in whose hands I should like to place the happiness of my life." She decided to go to the sea witch, of whom she had always been so much afraid. Maybe she could give the girl counsel and help. The little mermaid left the sea castle and took the road to the foaming whirlpools. Beyond these was the place where the sea witch dwelt. Suddenly, an ugly octopus tried to grab her hair. But she freed herself off his tentacles and escaped. At last, she came to a cave which was coated all over with slime. Inside sat the sea witch. In her wrinkly arms she held 2 toads, which she caressed very tenderly.
"I know what you want," said the sea witch. "You want to get rid of your fishtail and to have those 2 stilts instead, like human beings on Earth, so that the young prince may fall in love with you."
She laughed so loudly that one of the toads fell to the ground.
"I will prepare a potion for you. After you drink it, your tail will disappear and shrink up into what humans call legs. But at every step it will feel as if you were treading upon sharp knives. Keep in your mind, for once your shape has become like a human being's, you can no more be a mermaid."
"I want to do it anyway," said the little mermaid.
"If you do not win the love of the prince, and he marries another girl, your heart will break, and you will become foam on the crest of the waves."
"I have made my decision," responded the little mermaid, and she became pale as chalk.
"But I must be paid also," said the witch. "You have the sweetest voice of any who dwell here in the depths of the sea. This voice of yours you must give to me."
"But if you take away my voice," said the little mermaid, "what is left for me?" The witch laughed viciously at the girl.
"Well, have you lost your courage?"
"Then it shall be so," said the little mermaid. At the next moment the witch took away the mermaid's voice with a spell of muteness. Then she placed her cauldron on the hearth and started to prepare the magic potion, mixing in some snake blood, snail slime, and swamp herbs. After she finished the brew, she gave it to the princess and sent her away. The little mermaid rose up through the dark blue waters. The sun had not yet risen when she came in sight of the prince's palace and approached the beautiful marble steps. Then she drank the potion, and it seemed as if a two-edged sword went through her delicate body. She fell into a swoon and lay like one dead. When she woke up, the handsome young prince was standing just in front of her. He fixed his coal-black eyes upon her, and she became aware that she had as pretty a pair of white legs as any little maiden could have. The prince asked her who she was, but she could not speak. She stood up, but every step she took was as the witch had said it would be. She felt as if treading upon sharp knives. The prince invited her to his castle and introduced her to his parents. They greeted her very cordially, but she could only smile at them. Nicely dressed servants stepped forward and started to sing before the company. They sang very beautifully, but the little mermaid knew how much more sweetly she herself sang once. The servants next performed some pretty dances to the sound of beautiful music. Then the little mermaid raised her lovely white arms, stood on the tips of her toes, and began to dance. She was so gracious that everyone was enchanted. Though Each time her foot touched the floor, it seemed to her as if she trod on sharp knives. The prince noticed nothing of her suffering. He came to her, took her hands, and started dancing. "You are so pretty," he said to her. "Please remain with me." From now on, the little mermaid lived in the prince's palace and was quite happy. But the prince loved her only as he would love a little sister. It never came into his mind to make her his wife. "You are dear to me," he once said to her, "and you are like a young maiden whom I once saw. I was in a ship that was wrecked, and the waves cast me ashore, where a young maiden found me and saved my life. Unfortunately, I never met her again." Very soon it was said that the prince must marry, and that the beautiful daughter of a neighbor king would be his wife. So a fine ship was being fitted out. "I must see this princess," he said to the little mermaid after they set sail. "My parents desire it, but they will not oblige me to bring her home as my bride. She is not like the beautiful maiden whom you resemble. If I were forced to choose a bride, I would rather choose you, my sweet mute." The little mermaid felt her heart throbbing in her breast. "It was me who saved your life," she tried to say with her eyes. But of course he didn't understand her, and kept believing that the unknown girl who had found him had also saved his life. In the moonlight, when all on board were asleep, except the man at the helm, she sat on the deck, gazing down through the clear water. Then she thought she could distinguish her father's castle. Suddenly her sisters appeared up on the waves and gazed at her mournfully, wringing their white hands. Then she beheld her father and her grandmother, and she remembered the beautiful days which they had enjoyed together in the sea castle. The next morning the ship sailed into the harbor of the king whom the prince was going to visit. His daughter, the princess, came to welcome the company. When the prince saw her, he stared at her and said, "It was you! You saved my life when I lay dead on the beach." And he enfolded his blushing bride in his arms. "Oh, I am too happy," said he later to the little mermaid. But she felt as if her heart was already broken. His wedding morning would bring death to her, and she would change into the foam of the sea. On the morning of the wedding day, all the church bells rang. The bride and bridegroom joined their hands and received the blessing of the bishop in the wedding cathedral. The little mermaid stood sadly a little aside and could only think of her unavoidable death on the following morning. On the same evening, the bride and bridegroom went on the ship, accompanied by their families and followers. Flags were waving and joyous music was heard. The ship glided away smoothly and lightly over the calm sea. When it grew dark, a number of colored lamps were lit, and the sailors danced merrily on the deck. The little mermaid could not help thinking of her first rising out of the sea, when she had seen similar festivities and joys on the prince's ship. Then she joined the dance floor and started to dance. She had never moved so elegantly before. She waved her tender arms to the music and had never looked more gorgeous. All present cheered her with wonder. Her tender feet felt again as if cut with sharp knives. But she cared not for it. She knew this was the last evening of her life. The little mermaid fainted. The wild dance, the pain and the sorrow had totally exhausted her. She woke up just before sunrise and was now all alone on the deck of the ship. The seaman had laid her in a hammock where she could recover. She struggled to her feet and went to the cabin where the prince slept with his bride. There she saw him asleep and kissed his forehead one last time. Then she went out on deck. She threw herself from the ship into the sea and thought her body was dissolving into foam. But then she felt like she was floating. She saw the bright sun, and all around her were hundreds of transparent, beautiful beings. The little mermaid perceived that she had a body like theirs. Surprisedly, she heard a peculiar melody as if from a distance. The little mermaid felt light and weightless and began to rise higher and higher out of the foam. "Where am I?" she asked, and realized that she had her voice back. It sounded ethereal, like the voices of those beings who were with her. "Among the daughters of the air," answered one of them. "I thought I had no immortal soul," wondered the little mermaid. "That is true," answered the daughters of the air. "We don't either. But after we have striven 300 years for all the good in our power, we can take part in the happiness of mankind and receive an immortal soul." "You, little mermaid, have tried with your whole heart to do as we are doing. You have raised yourself to the spirit world by your good deeds, and now, by striving for 300 years in the same way, you may obtain your immortal soul." The little mermaid lifted her eyes towards the sun and felt them for the first time filling with tears. "Then after 300 years I shall meet the prince again," said she gladly. "We may even reach heaven sooner," whispered one of her companions. "Every time we succeed in making a child smile, or helping the humans to be more friendly to each other, our waiting time gets shortened." "Oh, I feel certain that I will make plenty of children smile," said the little mermaid full of joy, and then, together with her air sisters, she took happily to the skies.